Welcome back to part 7 of the Skeet shooting tutorial series. In this part, we're going to look at building some UI for our weapons and setting up the reload time that's set up. Now, one of the things that we talked about at the very first was the downloading the UI.zip file. I've unzipped the assets here, and there's several of them here that we can use. What I'm going to do is grab all of these and just drag them into my 2D assets folder. You can drag them anywhere you want to into the project, but the 2D assets folder will be kind of the easiest. What I want to do is take each of these, the PSM, the rocket shape, 6-shooter, and 6-shooter shell, and I'm going to mark all of those as sprites because these are going to be part of our UI system. And then go ahead and click on apply, and that should set it up. And we're going to set this up in parts so that we can work with this. First thing we're going to do is set up our UI system for the 6-shooter and make that work. So I'm going to come into my canvas, make sure my canvas is selected. I'm going to create a UI image. And that first image, I'm going to call this my 6-shooter chamber. This 6-shooter chamber, I'm going to use this 6-shooter chamber sprite to put that in. Now, importantly, this part is really important, and we seem to be having some problems with this still. The anchor and position of this will be very important. Now, I could just start moving it around, but it's going to be really critical that it's anchored in exactly the same place as these shells are anchored. So what I'm going to do is take this 6-shooter chamber. I'm going to click on the anchor presets, hold the Shift and the Alt down, Shift and Alt, and anchor that in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Now, I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger here so that we can see it for a minute as we're building this. But we're going to kind of stick that in the bottom left hand of the screen. Now, if I want to shift it off that right off the bottom, then I can. I could shift that over just a little bit in X. Maybe I shift that over a little bit in Y. For this case, I'm just going to do 10 and 10 so that I shift that off that bottom corner. Now, the next thing that I want to do is start to bring in these 6-shooter shells. Now, again, what I'll do is I'm going to come in, create a new UI. Let's create this new UI as UI image, and this is going to be, I'm going to call this shell 01. Now, with shell 01, I'm going to do some things that become kind of important. First, I'm going to take shell 01 and make it a child of the chamber. Now, the reason for this is that now when I start to use this, if I hold Shift and Alt down and center it, it doesn't center it in the center of the screen, it centers it in the center of the parent. And so what this means is that all of these shells will be centered right at the center of that parent. Now on this shell, I'll go ahead and give the sprite its setting right there. I'm also going to take just a minute. Let's try, I'm going to do 30 by 30. That's a reasonable guess. But what I can do now is I can start to slide this up into place. It looks like maybe a little bit smaller. How about 25 by 25? Yours might be a little bit different. But I can kind of put that right there at 0, 0, 0, so that's fine. And now what I can do is with that one shell, I'm going to duplicate that shell, rename this shell 2, and I'm going to start placing these into position. So I'm going to look at this in 2D because that will make this a little bit easier to kind of work with. So I'll slide shell 2 into a good place there. I'm going to duplicate that one. This will be shell 3. Slide it into place. And then let's do that with 4. Five. And then we'll do one more for 6 so that we've got all 6 set up. All right. What this means is that if I take the parent object and move that around, then all of those go with it. And if I resize my screen, which I will need to do, then I'm always sure that those shells end up in the right place. So we can do a few other things with this if we want to kind of fancy it up. So maybe I'm going to take these shells I'm going to select all of them, and let's pick a green. So let's do 0 in red, full on in green, and 0 in blue. So we've got a true green. I'm going to just use green here because I'm going to use some of the other ones. Now what we need to do is build it so that our script knows to start turning these off. So every time I press fire with the pistol, it's going to turn one of these perhaps to red. And then when it's ready, it will reload them back to green. So to do this, I need to start working with my weapon script again, where I can make, because the weapon script is where I'm keeping track of what the gun is doing. Now, the idea here is that when I start to fire this pistol, I want to make sure, here I'm going to collapse some of these just so it's a little bit easier to see. I want to make sure that when I'm firing this pistol, that what's happening is that when I'm out of ammo, I can't fire anymore. So to do this, what I'll do is come into my pistol stuff, and I'm going to make a, I'm just going to make it public for now. I'm going to make a public Boolean called can fire pistol. Now this can fire pistol, when this is off, then I'm going to make it so that we can't continue to fire the gun. When it's on, we can. Now there's some things that I probably want to start to do here. In the start, when the game starts, I'm showing the pistol to start with, so I want to do a couple things. Number one, I'm going to make sure that active weapon is actually equal to pistol, so that the game knows that pistol is the active weapon. And when the game starts, I'm going to set can fire pistol to be equal to true. Okay. Now, just setting this as true doesn't do us much good until I get back down here. What I can start to do here is say if the active, when I press fire, if the active weapon is pistol and can fire pistol is true, then we'll go ahead and do this work. Now, you can actually say can fire pistol equals to true like this, or the keyboard the shortcut in Unity is with Booleans. If you just call it out in this way inside of an if statement, then the implication there is if this is true. So if active weapon is equal to pistol and we can fire it, then go ahead and do this work. Now, what I want to do though is that every time I actually fire the pistol, then I want to start turning turning the different parts of the different UI elements off. Now to do this, I'm going to make what's called a case switch. Case switches are kind of an interesting thing. We haven't really looked at it yet, but they're really powerful in this kind of a situation where we might have a lot of different uses. The way that the general form of a case switch goes like this. I'm going to create a switch, and then what it does is check whatever this is. And then depending on whatever that is, then it does certain things. So for instance, I'm going to create something that's called next chamber, and this will be just an integer. And so depending on what this number is, if it's 1, it will do one set of things. If it's 2, it will do another set of things. So let's make sure right now it doesn't know next chamber. So I'm going to come up into the pistol stuff, and let's create an integer that I'm going to call next chamber. And then just to make sure I'm doing this at the front, let's make sure that next chamber is equal to 1. Okay. Just when the game first starts. Now later we might kind of change that as time goes on. Okay, so here's the idea. So we're going to start making different cases to do things. So in the case that next chamber is 1, then I do this work. Okay, is how that's going to work, and then you set a break. So we'll do the same kind of thing with in the case that the thing is 2. Then we'll do this, we'll do this other work, and then we'll break that case so that it knows to move on to the next one. Now what we need to be doing here, of course, is starting to figure out what that work is. Now in each of these, what we're going to do is we're going to change the color of one of those UI elements. So we need to make sure that this script knows what they are. So let's come in here and create, we're going to be working with UI. So let's make sure that we're using Unity engine.ui in this case. And then what I'm going to start to do is build some variables that will hold the images that are actually those shells. So let's come in here, and I'm going to make a public image that's going to be shell01. And then let's make 6 of these because I've got 6 shells. So I'll just copy that, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's change these real quick, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So I've got those. I'm going to go ahead and save those, and while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup. Oh, it looks like I've got some errors. Oh, it's because I've started to build, I've got some pseudocode in here. Okay, so I'll have to tie those up together in a minute. So those are the images. So with the images, I could do a couple different things. I could set them to be active or deactive. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the colors. So if the next chamber is 1, then what I'm going to do is tell shell01, I'm going to tell its color to be equal to a new color. Remember, color works with R, G, and B values. So let's say that I want it to go red. I'll go 1 for red, 0 for green, and 0 for blue. That will give me a true red color. So this is the same idea that I'll do for all of these. So for instance, let's just kind of pack all these in so that I've got it. In the case of, if next chamber is case 2, then shell number 2 we want to change to red. If it's case 3, then shell 3. Case 4, if next chamber is 4, then take shell 4, make that one red. Case 5, we'll take case 5, turn that one to red. And finally, in case 6, we'll change shell 6 to be red. And the last thing that you always want to do in a case switch is add a default case, so that if none of those are true, meet it, then we'll go ahead and set this to break. Okay, so there's what that switch is. Let's go ahead and save this, and we'll show what this does, and then we'll need to come back to look at this in a second. Okay, so we'll let this compile. Let's go ahead and clear this off. Oh, it looks like we got, let's see where we got a problem with. Oh. I gotta make sure those all have 0. That was silly. Okay. So save, let's come back, let that compile. Okay, so it compiled cleanly. What we should see over here, though, is that now when we look at our script holder, now it should be asking for shells 1 through 6. So here we can go ahead and just plug these in. I could also write this in script to go out and find these as well. But so far in this semester, we've largely just been plugging these in manually. Okay, so all of these are plugged in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Canfire pistol, you can see, is off when we by default, but when I start the game, then we should see Canfire pistol turn on, which it does because we set that in the start. And then what should happen is when I start to press, when I'm out in the game, and I start to press fire, then see, it looks like the first one turned off, which was great. Turned red, but none of the other ones did. Now the reason is that the case switch 1 was there, but we're never changing the next chamber. So we need to make sure and build that in. So the way that we'll do this is, for now, let's go ahead and just tell it that every time that we come through and we press fire and pistol is the one that we're at, I'm going to take the number that is next chamber. And you can, the long term is next chamber is equal to next chamber plus 1. That's what's really happening here. But the shorthand is that you can also just come in and do a double plus. Next chamber is equal to plus plus. All right, so what this should do is that when we play this, when I hit play and I hit 1, when I start to fire, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you can see it turns each of those UIs to red. Now, once we get to 6, now we get to 7, right? Where next chamber suddenly becomes 7 because we've added one to it, and that's not what we want. So we need to start to build this in so it does a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here is let's come in and say if next chamber is less than 6, then go ahead, chamber is less than 6, then go ahead and add one to the next chamber. Okay, so this will come through, and only when it's less than 6 it will add one to next chamber. But if it's not less than 6, meaning that it's 6 or more, then we want to do a couple things. One, I want to make it so that we can't keep firing. So I'm going to say can fire pistol is equal to false. And the second thing is I want to start a coroutine that gives us a timer before it starts loading back up. So I'll start a coroutine here that I'm going to call reload pistol. Now I haven't written that enumerator yet, which is why it's complaining there. But this will start to build this as we need. Okay, so while we're at it, let's go ahead and build this reload pistol down here. So let me close some of these other methods here so that we can see what's happening. So let's create an enumerator here that will be our reload pistol. Our reload pistol is going to do some fairly simple things. We can probably put the pistol away if we want to, or we can leave it out. You can kind of decide how you want this to happen. But I'm going to go ahead and put it away. So I'm going to use itween, well, here, let's just copy it from up here so I can, here's swap weapons. So I'm going to rotate the pistol pivot down, because remember this is puts the whole thing down. So I'm going to put the whole thing down here, so this rotates the pistol down out of sight. What I'll do is I'm going to set active weapon to be equal to none, right? You could automatically have it swapped to the next one, but I'm just going to set this to none. Then what I'll do is I'm going to wait, yield return new wait for seconds, and let's wait for, oh, let's say 3 seconds. We might adjust this in a second. Let's do 1 second for now, and then what I'll start to do is I'm going to start to turn those shells back to green. So here I'll just copy one of these, and let's go ahead and put that in there. So we'll wait for 1 second, and then we don't want to go red, we want to go turn that back to green. So I'll set that like that, and then once I turn, see, let's do that on number 6 because that was the last one. I'm going to copy this data here, put that there, and let's tell it to wait for maybe half a second. And then I'm going to start doing the same thing kind of over and over again, but changing each shell color as we go. So there's 6, let's change it to 5, 4, 3, 2, and looks like we need one more, and 1. Okay, so those will turn all those back to green, and now that they're all back to green, now we should be able to refire things. So we need to do 2 things. One is we need to change next chamber back to be equal to 1 so that it knows which case to turn off to switch up in our case switch. And second is I want to turn can fire pistol back to true so that I can actually fire the gun again. All right. Let's take a look, see if that works. All right, after compiling, we can go ahead and click play here. I'm going to make sure I'm in the pistol. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm clicking and nothing is doing there, but you can see it reloads. Once it's done reloading, I can pull up 1 again and start to press fire. It goes ahead and puts it away till it reloads. If I pull it up again, fire, then I can go ahead and get that firing as I go. Now there is one thing that I've discovered about the code that's a problem that we need to fix before we go too far. If I click on play and I'm using my pistol, then when I swap to pistol, if I'm clicking, right now I'm clicking up in the sky, and I'm not getting anything happening. But then when I look at the ground and I click, I'm able to actually fire the gun. But when I move up to the sky and I click, then nothing's happening. Now when I actually hit something, then I'm able to fire the gun. Now the reason for this is the way that we've got this structured in here. It's got some problems that we want to fix. The way that this is structured is when I press fire 1, if pistol and can fire pistol are true, then what it does is it starts to do this work. But importantly, what happens is the only time that it does all of this work, including changing the chamber and all those kinds of things, is if we are ray casting against something, right? Now that's great, but the problem is for instance, our gun effects and our next chamber, all of this stuff is only happening if we're ray casting against something, which is not a good place for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gun effects, which actually spin it and all that kind of stuff, and all of this, and I'm going to cut it so that it's outside of that area. And then sometimes it's just easier to see this. I'm going to minimize that, but I still want to this code that I'm going to paste in here to still be inside of the pistol and can fire pistol, so between these two brackets. But I don't want it to be within the brackets of the raycast so that it sets up there. So what this will do is that if physics is casting against something, then if it's pigeon, it goes ahead and does the work. If it's not, then it instantiates the bullet hole. But every time, if we're in pistol and can fire pistol, whether or not we raycast against something or not, it will show the gun effects and start to remove ammo from our cut. So if I save that, come back to Unity, then what will happen here is that when I play, and I'm in the pistol, even if I fire at the sky, then it still fires and takes away my ammo. All right, that's probably all we'll do for this tutorial. We'll move on and look at how to do the reload on the next two, on the rocket launcher and the PSM in the next one.